Welcome back to another episode of the Penn State Show here on DK Sports Radio. As always, I'm your host, Audrey Snyder, Penn State beat writer here at DK Pittsburgh Sports. And we've made it to May, and it finally looks and feels like May, so there's certainly a lot to be excited about in Happy Valley this time of the year, especially now that the draft is over with, and I promise you I will not look at another mock draft until at least next January, maybe February. We'll see how long I can go. But, of course, the big news in the past week, Saquon Barkley, in case you were living under a rock, Saquon Barkley goes number 2 overall to the New York Giants. And Barkley was one of 6 former Nittany Lions who heard his name called throughout the 3-day course of the NFL draft. So, Penn State, you look at that as far as a recruiting tool for this program, and you better believe there's already a graphic out there being pumped out by the team with a photo of not only just Penn State's 6 draft picks, but also their guys who signed as undrafted free agents. There were quite a few of those as well. So really a huge draft class for Penn State. The 6 draft picks ties the most picks that they've had since 2010. The program record, of course, is 10 picks total, which was set in 1996. So, these 6 selections, you look at it, Barkley goes round 1, number 2, as we all expected. There was no scenario in my mind where he would be there beyond the top 5. I just couldn't fathom that. And then beyond that, you look and you see, okay, Mike Gesicki goes on day 2 to the Dolphins, which really makes a lot of sense when you look at his skill set, the fact that they will probably use him more as that oversized wide receiver because, let's be honest, we've all seen the blocking. The blocking is what it is with him, and that is certainly not a strong suit. But it's also a reason why, you use what this guy has, use it to your advantage. And for the Dolphins, of course, that strength for Gesicki is the oversized pass catcher who really can give you a lot of mismatches, especially in the red zone. So have to see how that plays out. And to me, and I'm sure to many others, the biggest surprise in this draft with regards to Penn State was safety Troy Apke going in the 4th round. That's right, going in the 4th round to the Washington Redskins. This, to me, had you told me that last year around this time, I would have said, what in the world, are you crazy? But you look at what Apke did starting after the season, of course, with the showcase game where he was the MVP in the Collegiate Bowl. And then you move on to the Combine where Deion Sanders is still trying to put into words Apke's 40-yard dash time, which was best among the safeties at the Combine. So all it ever takes is one team. And I think you look at Washington, especially kind of the way they've operated historically, some of the picks they make that you kind of scratch your head about. But when it comes to Apke, there's certainly something that they like there. And I get it. There's the speed. There's the special teams play. There's the fact that he was reliable on the back end. But for him to be the first Penn State player off the board on the 3rd day of the draft, that would not have been my guess. Now, of course, Deshaun Hamilton only went a couple picks later to the Denver Broncos, so works out actually a really great landing spot for Hamilton. I think the way you look at that, John Elway tweeted out shortly after the pick that they really were excited about what they were going to get with Hamilton, and they also sent out a Twitter graphic later on with the musical Hamilton with Deshaun Hamilton's face on it. So, of course, they're getting all of their publicity materials out there. And then Marcus Allen, I'm sure many of you are well aware, ends up with the Steelers in the 5th round. So, all in all for Penn State, you look at this draft class and you say, well, were there any surprises in terms of guys who didn't get picked out of those 6? And to me, the one that I thought had a pretty good shot of going but didn't was Grant Haley. Grant Haley ended up signing as an undrafted free agent with the New York Giants, so we'll have to see kind of how that shakes out for him. But you look at it and you say, okay, he ends up there. Jason Kabinda ends up as an undrafted free agent out in Oakland, where Saeed Blacknall will also join him. And, for Kabinda, the question is going to be, again, the speed. I mean, it's not the toughness. It's not really the durability. This is a guy who played an awful lot of football at Penn State at a key position, but he's going to have to try and carve out a spot on special teams to try and get this to stick. And when you look kind of, guys, 6th round, 7th round, in many cases, they're in a better situation going undrafted as opposed to, falling late into a situation where they can't pick their landing spot. So we'll have to see kind of how that works out for him. But you look at it, Penn State's secondary, Christian Campbell, here's his name called, gets drafted by Arizona, not Carolina. Brendan Mann did go to Carolina as an undrafted free agent, but Christian Campbell, and then you look at Penn State's secondary and you say, wow, this is a secondary that ends up with draft picks, with undrafted free agents, which really, I think, just shows the depth and perhaps maybe how Penn State fans were a little spoiled by what happened there the last few years on the back end. And really, all these guys who went will forever be linked to this program just because this is kind of part of that nucleus of players who helped Penn State turn it around, helped get the Nittany Lions, into back-to-back New Year's Six bowl games, back-to-back 11-win season. So all in all, a really interesting draft class for Penn State. It was also really interesting and exciting for me to be out there in Jerry World, checking all of that out at AT&T Stadium. It is indeed as massive of a venue as I was warned. The video board is absolutely distracting. I think I spent several hours, probably when you count it all up over the 2 days that I was there, just in the building for the draft, getting lost, just wandering around the concourse. A lot of fans there, as one would expect. Of course, you had some Browns fans who were a little ticked off on day 2 that their team didn't select Saquon Barkley the night before, but that's how it goes. Now we all kind of play the waiting game and see, okay, what happens when these guys report for rookie camp, then what happens in mini camp, what happens in training camp, and so on and so forth. But Saquon Barkley already shattering records with his jersey sales. Jerseys are flying off the shelf in New York, where he will, of course, keep number 26, not 21, which was his high school number that he had inside his tuxedo there last Thursday night. But that is a wrap on the Penn State draft class. And when we come back here on the Penn State Show on DK Sports Radio, let's talk more about this current team, especially as we head into May. Recruiting camps will be coming up soon. Then next thing we know, we'll blink and it'll be Lift for Life, and we'll be kind of back in the full swing of things again. But more talk on the actual team when we come back here on the Penn State Show on DK Sports Radio.
Miller Lite is the original light beer, and we'll always brew it to have more taste, with only 96 calories and 3.2 carbs. Because we believe that if you compromise on taste, you can taste the compromise. Miller Lite. Hold true.
Great beer, great responsibility. 2018 Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Average analysis, 12 fluid ounces. Less than 1 gram protein, 0 grams fat.
If you're one of the thousands of Western Pennsylvanians who love to get outdoors, then you need to check out this cool new website, stepoutside.org. Learn where, when, and how you can go camping, hiking, or hunting, or take part in power sports, shooting sports, or water sports in your local community or across the country at stepoutside.org, where everything you need to know is just a click away. That's stepoutside.org.
What I want from my public accounting firm is big ideas.
But I don't want to lose the personal attention.
My company needs global capabilities.
From a firm with local ownership.
And I want to work with industry experts.
Who take the time to understand my unique challenges. And that's what sets Snyder Downs apart. Expertise for the most complex business issues. With the service you need every day. To learn how our big thinking with a personal focus can help your company, visit SnyderDowns.com.
Injured in an accident? Need assistance in preserving your business's interests? Let the attorneys at Bassey, Vreeland & Associates protect your legal rights. For over 65 years, Bassey, Vreeland & Associates has been representing the citizens and businesses of southwestern Pennsylvania. With offices strategically located in Washington and Charleroi, Bassey, Vreeland & Associates can deliver results for you throughout the Pittsburgh area. Visit www.bmvlaw.com or call 724-228-7000 to see how Bassey, Vreeland & Associates can meet your legal needs. Bassey, Vreeland & Associates. We fight, we care, we win.
Welcome back to the Penn State Show here on DK Sports Radio. As always, I'm Audrey Snyder and chatting all things Penn State football. We went over the draft in the first part of the show. In this part, I always laugh when people say, well, it's May, Audrey, so what do you do now? Well, this thing never really stops, as we all know. I will be in New York City next Tuesday. And we'll be in Philadelphia next Wednesday as the Penn State Coaches Caravan gets fired up. Only 3 stops this year, but James Franklin will meet with the media in New York City and Philadelphia, and then he will also head to D.C. for that third and final caravan stop. Athletic Director Sandy Barber will meet with the media at all 3 stops as well, so hoping to get plenty of content out of that. I certainly have a notebook full of questions, as always. Never really run out of story ideas. That's kind of how this whole thing works, right? You keep generating ideas and trying to get answers to those ideas and answers to your questions. And to me, that's always the fun of this business, is you ideally never run out of questions, even when we're here in May. And I'm juggling a few different feature stories I'm working on. One of those, or one of the parts of those, I should say, ran on Wednesday, a feature I did on Snyder, and this is just part of it. I'll have much more on Snyder here from my interview with him where we sat down this spring. But looking at it, one of the things I wanted to write was how this coaching staff kind of fell in place this offseason, because we haven't had an offseason since James Franklin's been here where there's been this much turnover among this coaching staff. Now, granted, that's college football. This is everywhere. Of course, it still seems very foreign at Penn State just because of, when Joe Paterno and those assistants were here, they were here forever. And it wasn't really measured in seasons. It was more measured in decades. So, moving forward and you look at the roster turnover, really the coaching staff turnover, rather, this offseason. So that's something that I wanted to write about. And after the Blue-White game, I thought it was really interesting that it was the first time we had a chance to talk with Brent Pry since, the offseason, since his titles had shifted, at least at length. And Pry said that he used to be Penn State's assistant head coach. So that was one of his many roles in addition to being the defensive coordinator. But he said that he kind of went to bat for Sean Spencer this offseason for the defensive line coach, and James Franklin, Sandy Barber, Pry all got together, and apparently there were quite a few suitors for Sean Spencer, which shouldn't come as a surprise. You look at what this guy has done, some of the players he's turned out. Right away, Carl Nassib's a guy who comes to mind, the way Penn State's recruited, especially well along the defensive line, and Spencer's been in this business for a long time and was garnering some interest this offseason, so Penn State kind of sweetened the pot and gave him one of Pry's former roles. So now Spencer is also the assistant head coach in addition to being the run game coordinator and, of course, the defensive line coach. So that was something that I think really went under the radar this offseason because that was announced the same day that Snyder was announced as the running backs coach, the same day that it was announced that David Corley would coach the wide receivers instead of coaching the running backs, which is how it previously had been presented. But another interesting detail to that with how this staff came in place was really how Penn State went about finding Snyder, because James Franklin always has, this binder we always hear about of all these names of guys that he'd like to meet with, and he'll take them out to lunch during the coaching convention every year and just kind of bounce around ideas, really no different than any other profession where people stay in contact and kind of are always looking for that next job and those sorts of things. Well, it was Sean Spencer again who was kind of the glue there. It was Spencer who's known Snyder since Snyder was a high school coach in Florida. They've kept in touch over the years, reconnected at the coaching clinic a couple years ago, and it was then where Spencer introduced Snyder to James Franklin. And so they, got talking, kept in contact for the last couple years. So sure enough, Penn State has an opening, and Snyder at the time is at Florida, trying to figure out his own situation as the only holdover on that Florida staff, and reaches out to his buddy Sean Spencer and says, hey, Penn State still have an opening. Sure enough, they did, and at the time, that opening was then filled by David Corley. However, then Josh Gaddis left for Alabama, so there was that other vacancy, which really aligned well with Snyder, his credentials, his body of work. So that was kind of the story behind how all of this happened, which to me is fascinating hearing that, because in the midst of all that, Snyder told me that the Cleveland Browns wanted him to be their running backs coach. So that was on the table as well, and it was kind of like, hey, Penn State, if you want me, I'm ready. My bags are packed, but you got to let me know because otherwise I'm going to Cleveland. So kind of an interesting story there. And I'll have much more on my chat with Snyder, as well as looking ahead to Penn State's running backs and kind of what the plans are potentially for Ricky Slade and just what there is to like about this backfield. I'll also be digging into more on this offensive line here in the coming weeks. And Thursday, we should have my always popular labor of love known as the scholarship tracker. So I'll be looking at dusting off the old spreadsheet and seeing how Penn State scholarships are broken down by position, at least to the best of my knowledge. Again, this is never anything concrete, but just kind of the best guess that we can get it, because there always is a lot of behind-the-scenes shuffling with guys who are perhaps on a scholarship for one semester, those types of things. So I'll have that on Thursday. But then next week, it'll be plenty of Caravan coverage as I hit the road. And I'm really, I want to pick James Franklin's brain on a bunch of different topics here, and won't tip my hand too much because that could spoil next week's show. But I'm curious to see, kind of also speaking with Athletic Director Sandy Barber, kind of more of the direction of this program. Penn State did say this week their season ticket sales again are up and up. They will raise prices slightly, not too much of an increase, but student ticket prices are also going to go up by a couple dollars, few dollars. But for now, in early May, as the town starts to get ready and busy for graduation weekend, I will get back to the outdoors on this beautiful, sunny afternoon. But until next week, take care.